My name is Norm Volsky, your host, and this is the Digital Health Heavyweights Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Digital Health Heavyweights Podcast with your host, Norm Volsky. Today, I would love to introduce our guest, Nate Counts, who leads benefits and total rewards at Amtrak.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Norm. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining. So welcome to the podcast. You're down in Texas, aren't you?
Yes, the sweltering heat of Texas persists, but glad to be here and not sure I'm considered a heavyweight, but maybe representing the everyman or every person in your cadre of guests. So very happy to be here.
I would say any member of the advisor committee on EHIR is certainly a heavyweight in my book. So
Well, I'll take it.
you qualify for sure. So thank you for joining. And what I would love to do is kind of ask like how you found your way in your career into, health and benefits. You went to Pepperdine out in the West Coast. Then right after you got your master's from UT Austin, and then you found your way to Aon. Can you kind of walk me through like how you found your way over to Aon?
Yeah, of course. Went to undergrad, thought I'd be a doctor. Then that felt like it would take way too long. So quickly pivoted to some of my core classes of math, computer science, then realized, hey, I don't want to teach, so ended up with a undergrad in math, computer science, found out about actuarial science. So that's what led me into UT and that grad school program to start in actuarial science, where I felt like I could take math but apply it more on a day-to-day business application, and ultimately found a consulting gig, which felt like a better expression to me of where I wanted to head with that math statistics background than, say, the insurance side or some of those backroom actuaries. So a little bit of a fortuitous path, but if it winds through Malibu, it's not necessarily a bad place to go through.
Certainly jealous of your college experience. I spent my college years in Ohio, which were great. I don't have any regrets, but the weather wasn't all that good, probably November through April. So those happen to be some of the months you're actually spending at school. So might have been smart to actually spend some time in the sun, but oh well.
It's not too late.
Yeah, exactly. So, in terms of you joining Aon, kind of walk me through, you joined in the early 2000s. Now we're 20 years or so later. How's the benefits landscape changed from the time you joined Aon to now?
Yeah, great question. When I joined Aon, it was actually a small group called Chicago Consulting Actuaries, about 100 actuaries spread across the country. I think of it like a David versus Goliath, competing against the Aons and Towers and Mercers before we were acquired. But it was a great place to start. We didn't say no to anything. You asked us if we could do it. We said yes. Then we'd figure it out. But as far as the timing of it, going back to mid-2000s, like you asked, Medicare didn't even have prescription drug coverage, right? You think about the volume and spend in these specialty $1 million drugs, right? That was what was happening then, right? Passage of Medicare Part D and prescription drugs, right? There wasn't the iPhone in the mid-2000s, right? Our channeling to connect with people was, bugging Norm over dinner, every 3 months, asking, how your diabetes is doing. Norm saying, sure, great, it's all under control, and then hanging up, and we check the box and say, everything is great. Fast forward to 10 years later to 2010s, I think there was more of a recognition of well-being platforms and, how are we using incentives? Should we drive it towards participation or outcomes? And so I think that one-stop shop was more of the mid-2000s, and then now I'd say more of a carve-out, best-in-class approach seems to have been the upswing to find the niche provider, although I think some of that is coming back to look at more of a consolidated solution set.
Yeah, you were at Aon for many years through the acquisition, of course, and then you found your way over to AT&T. Kind of walk us through how you moved from the consulting side to, the benefits side at a big Fortune 500.
Yeah, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, although I think you can create a little bit of your own luck. So one of the clients I had was AT&T. We also did some work for Kaiser, interestingly enough, and more of the insurance side, USAA. And so had done a lot of on-site work for them. And so it really was an honor and a privilege when they reached out. And the action was, hey, we're in the middle of union negotiations. These are the days in 2009. They were the largest spender in healthcare, even more than the autos. So,
Wow.
$6+ billion a year. These are no deductible plans, no contributions or payroll deductions. And they were looking to say, I think we need to change that value proposition, not only from a cost competitive landscape, but also to drive better participant behavior. So I was lucky enough to come on board in 2012 and do a lot of that backroom modeling as part of the union negotiations. But what a great place to pivot. The size of that company was not something I was not used to. They offer healthcare coverage to a little over 1 million employees and participants. That's 1 in 300 Americans. And I think when you think about that, just walking down the street, that is a lot of impact. And then the complexity, multiple business units, benefits spanning 60 plus countries at the time. When I was leaving and they had, HBO Max and DirecTV, you were serving, I would say, the telecom employee in Alaska climbing the telephone pole, as well as Anderson Cooper in Atlanta, riding jet skis on his news coverage. So a wide spectrum of employee type, but a great place to pivot out of consulting and kind of see the rest of the story for how you impact inside of an employer.
Was Aon just so upset with AT&T for stealing their core employee that they just dropped him as a client?
That was definitely not the case. I would like to
Oh,
think I
okay.
was that special, but I don't think I was. It is a tricky dance, though, right? When your client is stealing your own employees, and I think that I was not the last person they took. I think, or the first.
Hmm.
So they were gracious in loaning me to AT&T, but I think that relationship continues well to this day, and I think it was largely driven by that small kind of grassroots consulting firm that said, "Hey, we're here to help however we can," and so that relationship I think is strong and persistent today. But yeah, lost a lot of good talent.
Yeah. Yep. So when you joined AT&T, you were a lead benefits consultant, and as you worked your way up in the organization over the years, by the end you were AVP of global benefits, covering over 1 million lives. Can you kind of walk us through your career progression from the time you joined AT&T to, having the big job at the end?
Yeah, it's a great question. I when I was in school, I didn't think I would be in human resources. I honestly couldn't tell you probably what human resources did, but being inside, I think was an amazing opportunity because it really is that full spectrum, right? When you're starting even as that lead benefits consultant, the consultative piece, it's much more than what is just the dollars and cents of a decision or particular point solution, right? It's how do you stakeholder and get agreement that that is even the direction to go? How do you work your way up a Fortune 10 company to get approval at every level? And then how do you implement going to contracting, the data security, all the change management? Ultimately, benefits biggest problem is people actually showing up and using it. So
Correct.
the consultant pitch up front to just say, hey, this is going to save you tons of money and impact, right? That full spectrum, I think, was really the opportunity and kind of moving from that lead benefits consultant to heading more of their benefits group departments. I called it work arbitrage a little bit. It was injecting into that benefits role, I think, more of a strategic and finance mindset, right? I think the same evolution that we've seen the people organizations or human resources organizations have to undergo the past 10 years or so. But it was a big pivot to say, where is the value in this landscape, right? As a consultant, when I first started, I was thinking, well, I can just do this in-house and we don't have to pay $100,000 to someone else. But that's the wrong focus area. Really, it's have them, guide them and have them focus on the $100,000 project, and instead focus on the $6 billion of healthcare spend. Focus on the $100 billion of revenue. So moving from that just time and expense mindset to really the opportunity of impact for any company, let alone the size of AT&T, was really, I think, that challenge going from starting at the bottom as a consultant to having the privilege to lead a lot of their team.
That's incredible. Talk to us a little bit about some of the lessons you learned influencing healthcare spend, above $3 billion.
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, in some ways at AT&T, it was easier because of the size and the scale. When you add an extra zero on the end of things, it allows you access to more conversations. Your partners are more willing to do some unique contracting things or maybe tweak their product set to match your needs and interests. But the flip side of that coin is that sometimes you almost have too much power, or you spend too much time designing the perfect solution. And so perfect can become the enemy of the good. And you would have been better off launching, one of the top 3 vendors in a particular space and spending years designing and setting up the contract and data to have that perfect solution. And you can also over-engineer as an actuary or just in general what you offer, and the experience is diluted and you come back to that utilization problem. So to me, those were some of the lessons and opportunities from a company of that size and scale. You got the good of access to some pretty amazing conversations, but you could get yourself in trouble because a lot of times they would listen to what you asked for when they should probably say no.
At the risk of giving one of my sales friends an aneurysm, any specific things you'd go back in time and change? You're like, oh, I should have bought this or I should have done that, back in those AT&T days.
Yeah, I could generalize it, I think, to protect the identity of probably myself and of any peers that you have. But the reality was, I think we just spent too long buying and investigating that. Pick a solution set or category like family support. You can argue about Maven or Clio or others, spend a couple years doing that. But had you just launched either Maven or Clio, or both great products, your employees would have had years of experience. You would have learned from what was working well and not working well, and could have tweaked from there. Also, a lot of the back-end financing at AT&T, we would tweak about, do we pay as a per employee per month fee? Is it paid as a case rate? Can I have a deal that limits how much margin you make off of me regardless of what I pay? So you get into some really complex financial arrangements that were hard to track, that maybe ultimately saved you some dollars at the end. But again, you're spending years without any solution, without any impact. And so you could probably check the box across lots of solution categories of where we could have launched something much sooner.
All right. So you're buying things quick now at Amtrak, now that you've learned these lessons.
That's a little bit of the hope. We still definitely apply some diligence and rigor, but hopefully we are a quicker buying cycle and saying we don't have all the resources to talk to 100 or 200 vendors a year. We're going to talk to 5 or 10 in the categories we're interested in and try to make a quick decision.
Yeah, that's great. You've really done a great job of reducing benefits overhead over your career. Can you walk us through strategies on how you're able to reduce overhead pretty significantly?
Yeah, I think one of the tricks, I'll say, that I think still does apply to many Fortune companies is impacting the retiree space. So for a company that has both active employees and retirees, focusing on the retiree subset can get you more bang for your buck because the present value of all those future cash flows gets recognized on their balance sheet immediately, right? So in the AT&T world, we were saying it's $3, $4, $5 billion of healthcare spend a year. A couple billion of that's retiree related, and so that might sit on their balance sheet as the present value of $2 billion every year as a $40 billion number. So when you make an impact to 1 year, you get to capture that all at once. So that was kind of item one where I think you can make change, which maybe doesn't apply to everyone. But I think something else that's important to note is Medicare, right? Medicare is where a lot of healthcare innovation is taking place as well, that can be converted downstream to the commercial market, right? How are they approaching value-based care? What are they doing for data and risk sharing arrangements? And so those two things in tandem were something that at AT&T we paid a lot of attention to, not only to deliver the financial value, but also a little bit to go to school on Medicare and say, how could that impact how we're approaching value-based care on the commercial side of the house? So even if you don't have a retiree population, I'd say still pay attention to Medicare and what's happening there, because it impacts a lot of downstream things in the commercial space. Like, where does all the quality data come from? It was all coming from Medicare, right? So your quality-driven solutions, value-based care solutions, it's a great place to start.
It's great advice. Walk me through. You had a lot of success over at AT&T. In the last handful of years, you moved over to Amtrak. Kind of walk me through that transition.
Yeah, Amtrak's been phenomenal. When I transitioned a couple years ago, might have said I was a little bit crazy, right? Business was down 97% in the midst of COVID, but there was a ton of opportunity on the horizon. So for me, it was all about growth, right? The business growing and rebounding, the opportunity for the infrastructure package, and to be able to reinvest in the country to bring more trains to more places. Amtrak's going to spend in the next 5 years more than they have the past 50 years of their entire existence. As well, I think an opportunity from a people perspective. They didn't have a total rewards team. That's what they were asking me to come to. They in fact had a lot of layoffs because of COVID, and so they wanted to bring someone in that could help stand up a benefits, stand up a compensation center of excellence or center of expertise, bring total rewards together in a way that could help drive the future. So for me, we've talked a lot about billions of dollars of savings, and hopefully this doesn't come across as hollow, but my guess is both you and I, talking 10 or 20 years from now, we'll talk more about the relationships and people whose paths we came across, more than, hey, I nailed this RFP and saved a couple $1 billion. So the people opportunity was also another big place. But if you can't get excited about Amtrak's future and the growth, it's hard to get excited about anything else. So great opportunity, and it's been a great pivot for me.
I know you call all the shots over there, so if you could get a high-speed train from Cleveland to Chicago and Cleveland to Cincinnati, that would be fantastic. I've got family in Chicago that I love to visit. One of my best friends lives there. And then in Cincinnati, it's like just far enough to be a little bit long of a commute. I'm actually going tomorrow to see Lionel Messi play because Cleveland doesn't have a soccer or football team. So I'm excited for that. But if I could just hop on a train, it would be a lot more convenient.
Messi was just here in Dallas. I feel awful for him having to deal with 110-degree heat, even though it was a little bit of a night game. And we're definitely work on the more trains and more places. I think we just increased our orders for trains that are coming to the Midwest almost to 100 trains. So a little higher speed, a little more touch points. So we're working on it for you, Norm.
I love that. That sounds fantastic. Walk me through employee engagement. It's a critical aspect of HR. It's a critical aspect of getting, the value, from some of these vendors. You've gotten, like the best engagement in all of HR. Can you walk me through how you did that and how you guys, have really done a better job than just about anyone in that area?
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. It starts with our internal people before it can translate to our employees. So from just a leadership philosophy standpoint, a lot of it is about transparency. Something I appreciated from my consulting days was the flatter structure. And even at AT&T, the opportunity for our leaders to cascade information down so that we could, start out of the gate up front. And then also have more of a bottom-up approach, right? Our employees on the front line are the people who have to deal with benefits, deal with the vendors. They know the most. And so when we really can empower them to bring ideas bottom up versus top down, I think that's where we get more fidelity. That's where they see more opportunity for career growth. And we ultimately get better solutions that will help engage, our employees when it comes to a benefits perspective. So I have great peers here, but that was part of the evolution, which I think drove some of the highest engagement we've had here at Amtrak and HR.
I love that. Are there any specific companies that you've worked with that have just engaged employees better than others or brought overhead down, and decreased overhead and decreased cost just really, really well? Any specific vendors that you'd shout out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think clearly the advocacy space, at Amtrak, we've worked with Alight and Compass. At AT&T, we worked with Grand Rounds, moving to more of that broader included health environment. But I think wherever you can have benefits less happening to you or happening to doctors versus taking pain points out of their life has been a tremendous success, right? Clearly during COVID, I think Wealthy was, a good Cinderella story as well, to say people just need help. They need someone to offload challenges and problems to so they can focus on more of the core work and day to day versus educating someone. And so I think that approach on experience has been some of the most fruitful and impactful. And I think companies, I won't mention maybe specific companies, but I think companies that have taken that simplistic approach versus, a fractured carve out of launching 1,000-point solution ships, I think are companies that have been more successful.
Okay. You've been, in very high level seats both at AT&T and at Amtrak. For someone who's maybe just getting into their first opportunity to lead benefits, at a Fortune 1000, what are some unexpected challenges you've faced in either of these last two roles that, might be able to guide someone in a time where, they might see that challenge and not really expect it coming?
Yeah, I think, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I think you can get a little bit of decision paralysis, certainly as a new leader. And that doesn't mean, don't vet or don't trust your teams in making that solution. But I think oftentimes through peer organizations or advisory groups, you'll know who some of the top vendors in a space are, and likely most of them will deliver incremental value over either nothing or a legacy product that you have. So I would say have a bias towards action, the fail fast mantra, but have that bias towards action and moving from spaces where you maybe don't have anything or legacy into at least having some offering, even if it's not the perfect solution set. So to
I
me,
love that.
that's item one. And then two, especially at this moment, if you're a new benefits leader, right? It used to be the case that finance was pretty much the decision maker. Benefits was a cost center, right? We saw through COVID, we see even now in the competitive landscape, it's as much of a chief people decision as it is a chief financial officer decision. And so I'd say lean into that moment. Benefits is a great cultural accelerant. So take advantage of that as you're launching these solutions.
Yeah. And that's really good advice just for anyone, personally, professionally. Action is better than inaction in most cases. I am part of an industry consortium on the recruiting side that I go to an event once every 6 months. And we get a lot of continuing education. It's some of the best recruiters in the country that are all trying to learn from each other, and we bring in speakers that might be able to inject some new ideas to how, recruiting can be done efficiently and, done at the highest level. So interestingly enough, the last one I attended, there was a gentleman who trains recruiting firms, but his business development, the way he attracts clients is through having a podcast. So he encouraged all of us, like, you should start a podcast. And many of the people I attended with were like, Norm, I can't believe how quickly you got your podcast up after he gave us that insight. And I really thought about it. I'm like, well, I thought a flawed podcast is better than no podcast. So I said, hey, it's never going to be perfect, but we're going to, try and work on the fly. And luckily I have a team who supports me that's made it look probably a lot better than it is. But really appreciate that thought, because I think it's good in really any business. When you're between a decision, always go for the effort, go for, the action. Most cases, you're not going to regret it. You've led huge teams. At AT&T, the team was 25 people. At Amtrak, I think it's about 15 people, give or take. What do you look for when hiring for your team?
Yeah, and even our Amtrak team continues to grow thematically. I think we're up to 30 now that we have some more safety functions. But
selling you short. I'm sorry.
No. But really, a couple items that I look for is one, skill set over domain knowledge. I honestly, in many ways, care less about how deep your subject matter expertise is, although it's helpful, clearly, but more about your skill set. What's your ability to learn new things, bring a new perspective? There is no script in healthcare or benefits for what comes next. And so your ability to learn and adapt, to probe, that's where value is going to come from.
Yep.
It isn't coming from, this is the way benefits was run, or this is the way we used to do things. So for me, skill set over domain was something that was very successful at AT&T and Amtrak. Those intrinsic learners, analytic, people who have moved into different functional and domain areas. I'd say the second, maybe oddly, is someone who's failed. One of my favorite interview questions is hearing about, tell me about a time you failed and learned. I think one, if you don't have something readily available, it might show, your ability to be humble and be a listener and receive feedback. But also those can be some of your biggest learning and growth areas, right? Whether it's a career pivot, a life pivot, that's something for me that reflects not only the person, but also the professionally, I think, how we can learn and adapt, some of that failing fast, right? So those are at least two things I always look for in people that we're recruiting.
That's great. You've been in this space for a long time. You're a certified coach practitioner. How has that certification helped you as a leader?
Yeah, I'm really glad Amtrak made the investment to have certified coaching. You'll hear, certainly in the consulting side, where technical ability probably rises over personnel or leadership ability. But really, I think it's a couple things. One, it's just listening. That sounds so simple. But when someone, an employee, a manager, a team member comes to you with a problem, it is very easy to solution. And the certified coaching program is really all about listening. What emotion are they bringing? What roadblocks are you hearing? And helping play back to them what the opportunities are. It's almost like therapy in the professional or career world, but it's harder to do than I think you would expect. And something more tactical, but something I also wrestle with, or continued opportunities, is just asking one question at a time. I think it's easy when you're encountering something new to ask a lot of compound questions or trailing questions that linger. Just start with your first thought, best thought. When they came to you with a problem, what was your first question? And then let them provide that answer in detail. So to me, it sounds very simple, but listening, allowing the space and time for silence to think, because really it's ultimately about them and them finding their own solutions to the answers a little bit. You're just asking as kind of an intermediary or sounding board to play that back to them and help them through the problem or challenge.
This is great stuff. If I wasn't recording this, I would be taking notes, but I'll be able to reference this later. So, really, really helpful. And I think, anyone who's an emerging leader or wants to become a better leader, I think that's fantastic advice. I want you to put your consultant hat back on in your Aon days. I think what's really cool about my day-to-day job, and I'm sure yours as well, is you get to meet a lot of these like entrepreneurs and founders like early in their journey. What advice would you give a entrepreneur and early founder going into a consulting meeting? Let's just say Aon says, hey, we want you to meet with some of our lead consultants, or Mercer or Willis, or one of the big ones. What advice would you give that founder?
Yeah, I think at the founder level, different than say, a rotating salesperson, right, that you might come across, is just to know your audience. AT&T was a slow sell. They were very complicated. Lots of questions, lots of customizations, right? Amtrak, as we talked about, a little bit of a quicker buyer, more focused, still looking for value, but going to take more of that off-the-shelf solution. I'd say, secondly, where is that audience on your adoption curve? I think we all know companies or benefit leaders who are quick and early in the adoption cycle. Could be an industry they're in, could be that they're a mid-market, tech buyer versus a large employer that's a manufacturer. Where are you going to invest your time? Don't go after the white whale. Now, not that all founders do, but I think you see a lot of salespeople doing that. There were countless companies that knocked on AT&T's door. They had the time and patience to listen because of the size of their team, but that product likely wasn't going anywhere. And so you were better off, I think, spending and focusing on who is really going to be that buyer, 100 mid-market clients, than spending a couple years in conversations, with a Fortune 10 company. And then last, less so as a founder, but that integration between the sales that the founder is going to bring and then ultimately the implementation team that's going to deliver that has to be a smooth handoff. Because the larger the buyer, the more customization is going to be on the financials, on the operations, and what they were sold, they're definitely going to want to be implemented. And as we know in new companies, there isn't always the best connectivity, or the salesperson is selling something that hasn't been designed by the product team. So that's just a tricky handoff that I'd want any founder to be aware of. And pitch the strategy and not the solution, right? If you're early in the space, all the great companies that we partnered with, we might have been buying an initial solution, but the best relationships were where that company was going as a strategy, broader platform set. So I think that's really the value that a founder brings, is that longer term vision and above and beyond kind of how they're compared in their initial competitor set.
I've heard ad nauseum that there's point solution fatigue. People in your seat are just getting absolutely pounded by, salespeople trying to sell them something. I, do a lot of work in the sales arena. I'd say for my clients, at least 25-30% of my business is placing salespeople and sales leaders. For my clients, what are the list of do not do's where you're like, hey, don't do any of these things because it really pissed me and my brethren off, and how to really do it the right way?
This is great. It's always easiest to talk about things that went wrong sometimes than things that went well. But pain points from salespeople, I think for me, one of my pet peeves was the long discovery phase, right? If I'm inviting you into a meeting, we have 30 minutes or an hour, and it's a first date, so to speak. I don't want that 25 of the 30 minutes to be questions to me so that you can tailor your sales pitch back. I want to know out of the gate, whether I was that lead benefits consultant or head of benefits, what is your unique value proposition against your competitor set? And why should I pick your solution, not only against your competitor set, but against all the other incremental decisions I can make? Why should I go into women's health versus fertility versus family support versus advocacy, all the things that I might have on my mind. So to me, it's a little bit get to the point. Do your homework beforehand. It's good to have a little bit of tailoring to where you see value, but don't burn a ton of calories and waste the person's time on that investigation or discovery. To me, that always drove me a little bit crazy.
So your advice is set the hook early.
Yes.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
good intel, and I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot
What's
of
the sizzle?
salespeople
Right.
might change their strategy at this point.
Well, good. I hope it goes somewhere. And that's not every buyer, but definitely for me, right? What's the reason for the meeting? Don't squander their time learning about them because they've told that same story about what they're looking for probably 5 or 10 times already that week, and it's going to come
Excellent.
across as a little bit inauthentic, or you don't know us or know the product, right?
Yeah. And I would imagine by doing some due diligence before the meeting, you can do the qualification early on. Like if you come prepared, you know who their lead consultant is, you know who the carrier is, you know what other vendors they've implemented. Like you can do a lot of the discovery up front if you actually do your homework. And then you can go in informed and have some semblance of how to pitch it and customize it without wasting your time.
Exactly. And who asked for the date, right? Did the company reach out to you? Was this a cold introduction or a handoff from someone? That should help tailor how much discovery there was. If I'm reaching out to you as an emerging company, that probably gives you more grace to have those discovery questions. But I think you're exactly right. But that's just something, I think I had seen probably more times than I'd like to count.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. No names on the
That's
offenders,
right.
please. Um, in terms of where we have some overlap, I'm a trusted partner of EHIR. I've loved working with them for the last 3+ years. You're involved with the group. Can you walk us through how you got involved with EHIR and what you do with them on a yearly basis?
Yeah, it was great. So it was a peer-to-peer opportunity. So Jason Perot, I'm sure many of the audience might know from Boeing. I worked with him at AT&T, and he was on Employee Health Innovation Roundtable Advisory Board. And so this was at a time when I was probably a little more junior at AT&T, but he mentioned this group as an exciting up-and-comer chance to vet. And my responsibility at the time was really talking to these 100 or 200 companies. And so an avenue to say, hey, what are my peers thinking about these companies? To instead of, taking all the calories across, 100, 200 meetings for a year and boil it down to a couple days to investigate and see the latest and greatest was a huge value proposition. In addition to that, I think the opportunity to say, not only from the employer side, but they have kind of a multi-sided model, right? Where you can hear from the provider element, you can hear from the investment or VC side, private equity, people that are having to put literally their money where their mouth is, gave a richer decision than just looking through an employer lens. So strength in numbers, it today is still some of my all-time favorite group to participate with. They like to think of themselves and are pirates in many ways, and I
Yeah.
think everyone says they love the people, whether it's where you work or people you partner with like EHAR, but some of the best people I've worked with in the industry. So easy to stick around and keep involved with them.
Yeah, they're fantastic, great people. They also get the health plan perspective, which I think is also extremely important from a vetting standpoint. Just estimate it. How much time do you think a curator like EHIR saves someone like you on a yearly basis?
It's probably 50, 100 hours, because really it's the conversations, especially at a total rewards leadership level, that you have to say no to. And so I don't have the opportunity to have 100 or 200 meetings a year, right? But EHAR runs a really tight forum that's really respectful and valued of your time. So I can see more in a day or two than I could have seen there or in other places for a week-long conference. And so it's really that efficiency of time, and not only bringing kind of the latest set of innovators in certain market categories, but then the speed and quality within those categories So it is to me, it's an easy yes. And at the price point compared to other memberships or what you could spend on consultants, it really is a no-brainer for me. And I've been part of it at each company that I've moved to because I think it's the first stop in easy value in the benefit space.
Yeah, a lot of your peers feel, the exact same way. What market categories are you most excited about or most bullish about over the coming 5 to 10 years in digital health?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I don't have the crystal ball there, but it's clear to me that, as you said, there is point solution fatigue. The pendulum is swinging back to have less solutions out there. But I think what most employers are wrestling with over the next 10 years is one, a little bit pivot out of health and more in finances, right? You've seen a lot of burgeoning of the financial well-being category, whether it's student loans, emergency savings, how to get more out of retirement and really focus on wealth as a total rewards leader. That's a category I think has a lot of upside. The more financially efficient we can make someone, the less time maybe they come back to me and ask for a pay raise, right? Or and an easy way to make it retentive if it's really value additive over time. And then I think continued movement into owning primary care, right? I think employers, again, are trying to get out of making benefits happen to people, upsetting doctors by adding prior authorizations, upsetting their employees and their families by jumping through another hoop of prior authorization and saying, how can I own more of that delivery experience? One, as a way to impact change in behavior, but two, just economically, right? If I can pay you as a physician a couple $100,000 a year versus millions of dollars in fee for service, that should be better for you for not having to bill time and burn out, and it should be better for me. And so there's clearly been an arms race in primary care. I don't know that there's a great answer for, who's going to win or how it's all going to shake out. But definitely bullish, clearly on continued investment in that space because that is where you'll make change. Getting into healthcare delivery is where there is, clearly the most value. Maybe not capital efficient that all investment or VC firms might be thinking about, but I think definitely from an employer perspective where there's focus.
I'm certainly trying to figure out who's going to win that space. I'll let you know when I do. What bold predictions do you have about the benefit space in the coming decade?
To me, it's the continued breadth of people impact, right? It's the movement, not just benefits standalone, but its impact as a cultural accelerant, right? If you offer fertility benefits, it's broader than just fertility benefits. It's what it says about how you care for your employees. It's an equalizer. So for me, as the pendulum and expectations for what employees expect for their company to say about themselves, culture, that's where I think there is the most value, that you're not only getting financial return in the benefits space, whether it's health or financial, but really that outsized cultural impact. I'm not even talking about social determinants of health, but just as a signal to what it means for you as a business to care for your employees. That's where you'll see, I think, more retention as employees kind of shift at a much greater pace than they have historically. So focus on things that really do go broader than both the finances or just your direct benefit space, but start impacting some of those environmental, social, governance, community aspects of how you serve your employees and customers.
You've managed, well over 1 million employees, healthcare benefits and all benefits, in your career. What are you most proud of? Like, what's the thing when you look back at your career, you're like, wow, like this specific thing or this specific decision really made an amazing impact?
Honestly, this might not be the answer to your question, but it really was the chance to pay it forward, right? The move for me from consulting into the employer space was such a great move to say, not only do they respect the IQ, the intelligence quotient, but the EQ and the emotional quotient. So me being able to kind of pay it forward to, other consultants, actuaries, MBAs looking for a place to make impact, deploy their skill set, and grow into leaders, I think is the one thing I'll without a doubt look back on as kind of the thing that I'm most proud of. So I was able to work with and bring on board to AT&T an incredible set of employees, some who now are in my role there or have gone on to bigger roles at Disney or at health plans. That will be the most rewarding impact is really paying it forward. I lucked into this and was happy to share it with whomever I could. I called it work arbitrage, I think, for a long time for reformed consultants to move into the employer space. Consulting is a great place to start. Iron sharpens iron. It might not be a great forever space, or at least it wasn't for me. So that pivot into the employer side was something that I'll look back on fondly for a long time.
I ask everyone this in this podcast series as we wrap up. How do you personally participate in wellness? What do you do, to kind of make sure you're operating at peak efficiency?
Yeah, I'm really judicious, I guess, about my schedule and time. I think you could work forever in these jobs.
Yeah.
And so for me, my evenings are a time that are kind of more dedicated and sacred. So shutting it down at 6 or 7, spending time with the kids, ensuring I get, this might sound crazy, a full 7 or 8 hours of sleep before my morning starts. And then I think through COVID, just in general, the move at Amtrak has been great to be more inclusive about mental health. And so I spend a lot of time focusing on, mindfulness, carving out time in my morning routine. Doesn't always happen, right? So like going to the gym, I might want to go 5 days a week and only happens 3. But really carving out 10 or 15 minutes to just reflect and be present. Amtrak, I'm lucky enough, has a employee resource group fully focused on mental health. I don't know how expansive that is versus, certain protected classes, but it's been a wonderful environment for that safety sensitive work and to lean into being your best self at all hours. So protecting work sounds crazy. Getting sleep will allow you on your next day to focus on what you really need to do versus, you could spend, 24 hours a day going through emails.
You could. And then you burn out, and that's not good for anyone. So gotta have balance. What are your favorite ways to exercise?
I like the early morning, so a good run for me. I try to balance going to the gym and going for a run. To me, well, certainly in Texas, the only time you can run these days is early in the morning.
Yeah.
But normally most people aren't online, so you really can have the freedom to disconnect. And it's just the space, right? You can let your mind run literally while you're running. I think some of the best ideas, whether you're going over a future presentation or you're thinking about a conversation, just the space, literally the space of the run, separate and apart from your day beginning, is the best physical time for me. The gym's great too, but probably not as fun as a good run.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then healthy recipes. I think fitness is important, sleep is important, but also like what you put in your body is really important to achieving, year-to-year wellness. So any healthy recipes that you highly recommend or staples in your household that maybe it gives someone listening the inspiration to try it themselves?
Well, this will be great because this will probably be, the worst recipe recommendation you've gotten. I am a very lazy cook.
Okay.
And so it comes across as healthy. So I always have an apple and a banana nearby. They require very little prep, very little cleaning, super portable. I also travel a lot these days. And so I always keep, just packs of oatmeal in my suitcase, right? There's always something, a coffee maker generally in your hotel room. It saves me time, right? So I think I get badged with being a healthy eater because people always see me on camera eating a banana or an apple. But really it's because I can buy it in bulk, requires no prep time, and it's super portable. So maybe that's a little bit of a mirror to our total rewards and benefit strategy. Make it simple, make it easy, and that'll give you the best utilization. So not a pure recipe, but but make it easy, and that'll be your best path to health, right? And so for me, it's always keeping kind of fruit around.
Whole foods, oats, apples, bananas, they're whole foods. So that's the Nate Counts whole foods diet. Really good, advice to everyone. I've actually been eating all week a granola I made. It's real good. It's got oats, maple syrup, tahini that has like chocolate flavor, and then a bunch of like nuts and seeds, and it's really good. And it's easy. Just wake up, put a little yogurt in a bowl, some granola, cut up some fruit, and good to go. So I think that's good advice in terms of it's got to be easy, it's got to be whole foods, and when it's there, you eat it, and you don't have to prepare much in our busy days. So again, Nathan, thank you so much for joining. You're our first benefits and total rewards leader we've had on this podcast. We'd love to have many more, because I know the audience is really interested in understanding your perspective, especially since you are a former benefits consultant as well. So thank you so much for joining and stepping into the ring with me. And thank you all for listening to the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast today. Thank you for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe below if you enjoyed it.